Right now, around 7,500 container ships are moving across the oceans, transporting almost everything the modern world depends on every single day. But the strangest thing is hidden inside their fuel tanks. These giant ships do not run on normal diesel fuel. What they burn is actually closer to asphalt than fuel. At normal temperatures, it is so thick that if you pour it into a barrel and turn the barrel upside down, it would not even flow out immediately. So why does the entire global shipping industry depend on this thick black fuel? Heavy fuel oil is essentially the heavy leftover residue remaining after crude oil has already had most of its more valuable products removed, such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. At normal temperatures, it is so thick that it can barely flow through pipelines unless it is constantly heated. But strangely, this fuel that many people see as little more than oil waste is actually powering most of the global shipping industry. Behind it are gigantic engines as tall as buildings, heating systems running day and night, and an entire multi-billion-dollar industry built around this thick black fuel. And the deeper you look into it, the stranger the entire system becomes. To understand why ships use this strange type of fuel, we first have to look inside an oil refinery. Crude oil is not actually a single uniform liquid. It is a mixture of many different components, ranging from light to extremely heavy substances. When crude oil is heated inside massive distillation towers, the lighter and more valuable products, such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, evaporate and are separated first. But at the very bottom, something else remains. A thick, heavy black liquid that barely wants to evaporate at all. This is the leftover residue after crude oil has already had most of its most valuable products removed. And strangely enough, instead of being thrown away, this oil residue eventually becomes the fuel used by some of the world's largest container ships. What makes heavy fuel oil so strange is not just the fact that it is almost as thick as asphalt. The real problem begins when the temperature drops. When that happens, this fuel starts thickening inside the pipelines, almost like grease hardening inside a cold frying pan. It no longer flows normally, and for a container ship in the middle of the ocean, that becomes a very serious problem. Heavy fuel oil cannot simply be pumped directly into an engine like normal diesel fuel. The ship's entire fuel system has to keep heating it almost constantly, day and night, just to keep it liquid enough to move through the pipes. If the heating system fails, the fuel can quickly become too thick to use, and at that point, the massive ship out in the ocean could start facing real trouble. Are you surprised that the entire global shipping industry depends on fuel this thick? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Heavy fuel oil is not just dirty and thick. Inside it, there is something that marine engineers are especially worried about: cat fines. These are tiny particles containing aluminum and silicon left over from the crude oil refining process. At first glance, they seem almost harmless, but in reality, they are nearly as hard as industrial abrasive materials. Once they get inside an engine, they slowly begin grinding away metal surfaces during countless hours of operation at sea. There are no dramatic explosions or immediate failures, but over time, these tiny particles can destroy pistons, cylinders, and many other extremely expensive components. That is why the fuel must constantly be cleaned through filtration and centrifuge systems before it enters the combustion chamber. Hidden deep beneath those massive stacks of containers is one of the largest engines ever built by humans. Some marine engines are nearly as tall as a four-story building and weigh as much as dozens of tanks combined. Even a single piston inside can be taller than an adult person. What is surprising is that these gigantic machines rotate extremely slowly. While a car engine can spin thousands of times per minute, many container ship engines only turn a little over 100 times during the same amount of time. And that is also the reason they can run on heavy fuel oil. This thick black fuel burns much more slowly than normal diesel, but that actually makes it suitable for these enormous engines that need to produce steady power for weeks at sea without stopping. There's a pretty common question people ask when looking at these giant container ships. Why don't they just use diesel like trucks, trains, or most modern vehicles? The reality is that most container ships cannot simply switch to regular diesel fuel. Part of the reason is that these enormous engines were originally designed to run on heavy fuel oil. They operate at much lower speeds and are optimized for this thick, slow-burning fuel. But the bigger reason is cost. A single container ship can operate continuously at sea for weeks and burn hundreds of tons of fuel every day. If all of that fuel had to be replaced with high-quality diesel, operating costs would increase dramatically almost overnight. And when thousands of ships are operating every single day, the cost of transporting goods around the world would rise as well. A massive container ship can burn far more fuel than most people imagine. Every day, some of the world's largest ships can consume more than 200 tons of fuel just to keep moving. And that is where the real issue begins. If these ships used normal diesel fuel instead of heavy fuel oil, operating costs could increase by around $60,000 to $80,000 per day for just one ship. When more than 7,000 container ships are operating continuously around the world, that difference quickly turns into hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. That is why the shipping industry is not only focused on which fuel is cleaner or more advanced. The first thing they care about is the cost of keeping global trade moving. That also explains why heavy fuel oil still exists. The reason is not technology, the real issue is cost. The global shipping industry operates by moving enormous amounts of cargo at the lowest possible price. And heavy fuel oil, no matter how dirty or complicated it is still significantly cheaper than most other alternatives. Even a small increase in fuel costs can quickly affect shipping prices across thousands of trade routes around the world. Heavy fuel oil may significantly reduce global shipping costs, but it also comes with a major downside. When burned inside gigantic engines, this fuel produces large amounts of sulfur, black smoke, and pollution particles that enter the atmosphere every single day. That is why container ships often leave behind thick trails of smoke across the ocean. When oil spills happen, heavy fuel oil becomes one of the most difficult fuels to clean up. Because it is so thick and heavy, it does not evaporate or break down quickly like many other fuels. Instead, it can stick to coastlines, rocks, and coastal ecosystems for a very long time. Even though it has existed for a very long time and comes with major environmental problems, heavy fuel oil has still not disappeared from the global shipping industry. Part of the reason is that modern container ships were designed around this fuel decades ago. But more importantly, the entire system behind them was built around it as well. From ports and refueling ships to massive storage facilities, almost the entire modern shipping network has been developed to support heavy fuel oil. Changing it is not as simple as pouring a different fuel into the engine. It would mean transforming an entire multi-trillion-dollar system operating across the world. And so far, no alternative has been cheap enough to fully replace it. Heavy fuel oil may be one of the strangest and most controversial fuels still used in the modern world today. It is dirty, almost as thick as asphalt, and comes with major environmental and operational problems. But the paradox is that this fuel, which many people see as the final leftover residue of crude oil, is still helping keep global trade running every single day. Behind the products that appear on supermarket shelves or arrive at people's front doors are thousands of container ships silently burning this thick black fuel for weeks at sea without stopping. And even today, the world still has not truly found a replacement that is cheap enough to fully take its place. And if you know any interesting stories or little-known facts about this fuel, leave them in the comments below. I think a lot of people would want to read them too. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next strange and fascinating stories.